Hi everyone, my name is Paulino Brenner and welcome to another edition of Educators, Performers, Creators Show, number 11. And today here I have two special guests, Carol Gaab and Carrie Toth. But I want to remind everyone we are live and we would like your participation. You can send a question to Carol or Carrie during this show, this presentation. Just leave a comment on the Google Plus event page or on YouTube, or if you are on Twitter, you can tweet with the hashtag EPC show. And if you're watching this as a video, you can always send a question to them directly or post it as a comment to this video. I'll make sure they get it and they'll get back to you, I'm sure. So I'm going to let them run this show. They have lots of top tips for you today, so they'll introduce themselves and run the show. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie.
Okay.
Why don't you introduce yourself first?
I will. I am Carrie Toth. I am a high school Spanish teacher in Carlisle, Illinois. I teach levels 1, 3, and 4 through Comprehensible input-based methods. Mainly TPRS in level 1 and mainly a content-based instruction in level 3 and 4, which is what Carol and I would like to talk to you a little bit about today as part of our Central States presentation, but also just our top tips.
Right. Great. And I'm Carol Gaab, and I'm just here to support Carrie. Generally, she makes me look really good, and so I align myself with people that are smarter than me. And so it's my great pleasure to present with her today. And we're going to talk to you about content-based comprehensible input, because we both teach with CI, or comprehensible input, and we both teach content. But really what I want to know from you is, what do you consider content? So I want you to think about that and think, okay, well, to everyone, content means something different. Some people think about subjects in school. They think about, chores. They think about countries and having students do country reports and geography and culture and all those kinds of things. But Carrie and I really have a different view of what culture, or excuse me, what content is. And it might be culture, but it really depends because content is relative. Next. There you go. It's relative, and it's relative to what? I'll ask you, see if you can guess. What is content really relative to? To your students. It's who's in front of you. Next. There you go. Thanks. So really our content will change just among our different periods maybe of the day, or the different groups that we have. And what Carrie is teaching, I probably won't teach, because I have to really cater my content to my individual students. But when we think about content, I want you to think about all the different ways or forms that you could actually present content. And so you see I have a list there, and I list people, and people could be classmates. They could be famous people or historical figures. And we can talk about real life experiences. Some people, if there's a natural disaster, they want to weave, a current event or what's going on in the world into their classroom. And so I want you to just open up your view of really what content is and think about all the different ways that we could incorporate different content-based instruction into our classroom.
One of the things that I do in my upper level classes is to attack global issues, because my students are rural and they don't have a lot of exposure to the world outside of Carlisle, Illinois. And global issues are a great starting point for them to understand the world around. You can see on the slide that there's a billboard, and that actually is a billboard that produces fresh water, because in Lima, Peru, the capital, they have very little water. They have a water shortage, but the air is about 98% humidity, and they're able to pull the humidity directly out of the air and create fresh, drinkable water. And so as we study where are the sources of clean water, my students do some experimentation on water here in Carlisle. They go out to different water sources and bring back samples. We have a really simple test we got from the chemistry teacher that lets us just measure the color of the water as it changes. The more contaminated it is, the more color is leached out. And they're always thinking, you know, this is a language class, but my students probably won't go on to be language teachers. This content is going to help them see using language in the future as whatever they want to be. And so many like science. And we have a lake in town, so a lot of kids go on to work for the conservation office there. It's kind of a way to link in whatever their career plans are with what we're doing in the classroom, and they get so engaged and so involved. And I think Carol might back me up on this. We talked last year at the Central States Conference about passion-based units and instruction based on your passions, and science is something I'm very passionate about. And so being able to use these global issues to kind of sneak some science and engineering in on my students. This is a picture, the slide that is showing, oh, can you go back one? The slide that's showing here are some of my kids as they were doing a science project. They had different parts of the experiment, and they had to cut them apart as a reading assessment and put the experiment into the right order. And so it gives me just a chance to do some cool assessments and bring in some, in this age of Common Core and cross-curricular type of lessons. Over to you, Carol.
Carrie's, yeah. Carrie's view of science is really a lot different from mine, and the things that she would attempt to teach are very different from what I would attempt to teach. And we just want to give you an idea of, you know, you can teach content with well-educated or consistently educated individuals who are very literate, who already have some background knowledge. And Carrie's students come from a different population than mine. I teach ESL and I teach Spanish, but generally my ESL students are not consistently educated. And so I will teach very low-level students who actually struggle with reading and who really don't have a lot of knowledge of any content or any science. An example is I was in the Dominican just last week, and I was trying to help a student learn how to read in Spanish, and I discovered he didn't know what a germ was. And so here I was teaching science to a gentleman trying to learn to read and explaining what a germ was. So you can see that I could never do water filtration or something. Carrie's done some great projects, but I have to curtail mine more to my students' level. And so, you know, Carol, one way that I do that.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I think teachers forget sometimes that we look at our students where they are, and we can tailor that content, whatever it is, just to meet them right where our students need it.
Exactly. And so you can still do content, you can still do science, but you're just going to adapt it, modify it, you know, differentiate it, right, for the level of student that you have. And think about elementary students. So even though my students are all 16 to 23 generally years old, sometimes it is a lot like preparing content for an elementary student based on their previous background knowledge. So one way that I draw in science is through just personalized content. And one of the personalized little things that I do is anyone who knows me knows that I like nature and I like wildlife, and I really have been dying to see a bear up close. I've seen him in the car far away, but I want to see a doggone bear, okay? So I reversed this into Spanish so that you would get a taste for what would this feel like if it were in the target language. Because remember, my target language is in English. When I present things in English, everyone confuses it thinking, oh, I'm using first language. No. So what I do is I teach the phrase want to see in the target language. And so it says right there, it says, I want to see an animal. What animal do I want to see? So I'll show photos or pictures of animals that generally are cognate kind of animals. and we'll play a little guessing game, and we'll take a vote, and we'll do things. And then finally, when they realize that I want to see a bear, they're now learning the word bear. And so for homework, actually what I do sometimes is I give them just one little paragraph at a time, because remember, they're not strong readers even in their first language. So I give them homework in their first language. And so an example of that is right here. It says, black bears are North America's most familiar and common bears. Despite their name, black bears can be blue-gray, they can be brown, cinnamon, or even white. Okay, so they go home and they read that in their first language. I don't care. They go home and they read it on their time in the first language, but then when they come back to school the next day, I just take the information now that they've learned from that reading, and now I ask them some questions, but I'll ask those questions in the target language. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that I've got some questions there that are actually in the target language, assuming, let's pretend that it were Spanish. I'm reversing, remember. So I'll do little discussions with them about what's possible or what's probable. And we, rather than talk about true, false, which is cut and dry, right or wrong, we like to just talk about ways that students will actually start thinking a little bit more. We could actually have a discussion and not worry about who's right or wrong. So the first question is it possible or probable? Is a black bear white? So that's just an example. The entire class is based on now a discussion about black bears, and I'll find different videos and I'll find different photos, and we'll discuss them all in the target language because now they've already learned a little bit about them. So that's just
Carol,
one.
I love that idea. The possible, probable. That is a great idea. I hadn't thought about that, but that opens the discussion up. If you true or false, it's just cut off. That's a really great idea.
Right, right. So it works for me. So maybe it'll work for you. So, Carrie, back to you.
Great. And
well,
sorry to interrupt there, but before we move on, I wanted to share with you, we have Catherine Uselin joining us. Hello, Catherine.
Yay.
And she gives
Hi, Catherine.
Here's a shout out to Catherine. She says, Hola, Carrie and Carol. I enjoy meeting you at ACTFL and online. Thank you for your leadership in languages. And she also shares a couple of thoughts. She says, great idea, Senora CMT, integrate environmental science and social justice and global issues into the world language classroom, passions, ours and theirs. And she also comments, context, what do our students know and where do they want to go? We tailor lessons to their needs and our community. Thank you, Catherine, for your comments. Keep them coming. And I want to remind everyone, we are live. So send your comments, post them as a comment in YouTube or Google Plus event page, or use Twitter, like Catherine is using Twitter with the hashtag EPC show. Back to you, Carrie.
Thank you, Catherine. She is such a Twitter buddy of ours. Everywhere we go, we try and keep Twitter lit up with the Twitter feed, and she's a good Twitter trooper. One of the other sessions that we're going to be doing that I'm going to be doing at Central States is about using iPads and about an iPad, whether you have a one-to-one class, which would be a nice class to have, but I don't have that. I have just a one iPad classroom. So I'm going to be presenting some of my favorite apps that are great apps if your kids all have iPads, but they're also really great apps if you're like me and you have one iPad to project for the whole class. And just a really great find that I love is the slide that you're going to see. This is Poplet Lite. And I love it because it goes along very well with our storytelling, our content-based fact that we go around comprehensible input. And everything I do, I want it to be comprehensible. And I think this app is fun because I can take any topic, any story that we've told, anything that we've read, and we can make a graphic graphic organizer on Poplet, and they call them popples, and you can just make a popple, put in your idea, and then each of the other popples will connect with a bar, and so it becomes this web. You can use it as a character web. You can use it to give main ideas from the text. You can use it to give story parts, and I threw in my dogs there. You can also use your popples to put in pictures, and so your students are then able to see pictures of things that connect them to the text as well. And sometimes, I mean, you could even do a story summary just based around these little popples that you've filled with story parts. So fun app, and lots and lots. I have an app addiction, and so I'm going to share a lot of really great things in this session if you're interested at all in using an iPad with your storytelling classroom.
Carrie, may I ask you, how are you populating the content? How are you asking these questions to populate this map?
Actually, if we've read a story, we might take whatever we consider the main idea of the chapter. So right now we're reading Vida y Muerte en la Mara Salvatrucha, which is a TPRS Publishing novel. The idea is that this narrator is deciding, you know, is the gang life for me or not. So I might have that be the centerpiece, and then as I make the other popples, I would ask the students to contribute. What are, in target language, of course, what are the things that are going to go or revolve around this main idea to prove our point? Because we really want that textual evidence, the support. The more they can support things, the better their writing, the better their speaking skills become, because there's, instead of just giving one-word answers, these are upper-level kids. So in level 1 and 2, they may give short answers, short sentences, novice-level things, but these are students who have had a lot of input, and so they're ready to really fill these bubbles up with good content.
Great. Thank you. And we have a comment from Cynthia, known in Twitter as Sonrisa del Campo, and she says, integrate passions into your teaching. Guess that means my students will be baking or doing something similar.
Those are
That's great.
Lucky students, because that lady is a great baker.
Yeah, indeed.
Hey,
yes.
Cynthia.
Excellent. So what's next?
So, Carrie, well, I want to go back to these popple things. So I'm just thinking about, you know, using that with my students, and knowing that my students really can't write. You know, I mean, if they struggle with reading, writing is even more challenging. But I was sitting here brainstorming, and I was thinking, you know, I could write out simple little statements, even about a bear, for example, in the target language.
Yes.
And I could have some of them be true, some of them be ridiculous, some of them be whatever, and then they could use that little phrase bank or word bank to populate their popple. So I always have to look for ways that I can, you know, that I can modify activities so that even low-level, you know, or let's just say
Carol,
students with low literacy levels.
The picture feature might be good for them too, because the picture feature, you might be able to populate your popples with all images, and then use it as more of a guide for speaking rather than a reading, or rather than a summary where they were writing. It might be just guiding them through which of these characteristics are true of theirs. I love that picture feature, and it's a user-friendly app. It's so easy to figure out how to make a popple and how to connect the popples, and it walks you through. It has little instructions. It's a great app, and free. That's Popple Lite. You can get a fancy version, but you can get the free Popple Lite, Poplet Lite version.
Yeah. And let's just go to an example. What I was thinking in my head was my students in my beginning group would only get as far as, you know, bears are black, bears are white, or can be white, whatever the phrase is. And so I put the photo of a white or off-color black bear with that phrase. You see what I'm saying? So I'm thinking of all different ways to put it together, but I love that Poplet idea, and so I'm hoping that somebody's going to be in my booth so that I can come to your session. So
that's our problem at Central States. We don't get to see each other enough.
Right. So Anyway, in terms of, you know, what you can do with low-level students and upper-level students, Carrie students are well-educated. They're higher-level, upper-level students, language students, that is. Most of mine are generally novice, low to novice, high, maybe intermediate, low. That's as high as my students generally ever get with the amount of time that I have them. But regardless of their literacy level and regardless of their language level, I still need to train them to think critically, to think, you know, on their feet, to problem solve, to really use some higher order thinking skills. Because if you think, most of my students are all of my students are baseball players. So if you're thinking of the game of baseball and making decisions, you know, just an infielder, most people don't realize that when that ball comes to him, instantly he has to make a decision about, you know, on what side he's going to field it, and if he's going to throw it home, is he going to hold it before he throws it, is he going to try to get a double play, is he just going to stop a run? You see, there's a whole lot to think about. So I really need to train them to think at a higher level in the target language. And so we're talking about HOT, which is higher order thinking, all right? And let me tell you what HOT is not. HOT is not just regurgitating facts or information. That's not at all what I'm talking about. But let me tell you what HOT is. HOT is inferring information or making, you know, surmising a fact from other facts, maybe within a story or within a text. It's manipulating facts. It's connecting facts to other things you already know, to previous knowledge. It's using facts to problem solve. It's a lot more than just knowing a word. To know, for example, oso means bear. Way beyond that, we want students to start thinking on a deeper level in the target language. And I'm going to tell you that when they're playing in a baseball game, all of that that's going on in the field is in the target language, or in other words, it's in English. So let's take a little quiz here. I want you to look at these 4 different kinds of questions that we generally ask, or, you know, 4 different ways that we might gauge comprehension, maybe from reading or even from listening to a story, and classify each one of those as higher order thinking or just low-level thinking. So H for high and L for low. So take a look at them. Comprehension questions, are they high or low? And if you ask why questions, are they high or low level thinking? And I'm going to tell you that the answer is, I don't have an answer. It depends. It depends how you ask each one of those kinds of questions, because any one of those questions could be a higher order thinking, or a question that elicits higher order thinking or critical thinking or problem solving or logic or anything that would really inspire our students to think on a deeper level. And so you have to remember that it's far more important for your students to think than it is for them to be correct. So generally, when we ask comprehension questions, we always are asking questions that are either right or wrong. And it really doesn't require much thought at all. So I always try to go in stages of asking super easy, right, wrong, who, what, where, but then step it up so that the questions become higher order thinking types of questions. And so I'm going to use Paulino as my example today. And so there's a little paragraph here about Paulino, and it says, Paulino Brenner is our host today. He is active on Twitter. He's also active on Facebook. Have you seen his profile on LinkedIn and Google, or his pins on Pinterest? He even has a YouTube account with videos of himself all over the internet. It's awesome. So now let's just say that he were our content of the day. These might be 2 types of questions that I would use to find out about what you really understood about Paulino. Now, I generally don't do the straight up true and false. If I'm going to maybe do a little assessment, okay, I might do true or false, but even then, I give my students every opportunity to show me what they know. And multiple choice generally only shows you what they don't know. And true and false generally only shows you what they don't know. So I try to, instead of asking questions that are straight up true, false, I go with the probable or possible. So here's an example of the difference. So I say, Paulino's on Twitter, true or false? Carrie Toth, true or false?
True.
True. Paulino was our host, true or false?
False. Oh, true. You got me.
True. True.
True.
Well, you were almost wrong, Carrie.
Oh, I was almost wrong.
I hope that doesn't raise your affective filter. Okay, you've got the idea. All these true-false questions just on basic facts, but now let's do this. Let's ask some questions that really make you understand, show that you understand the reading, but make you think a little more about Paulino. So is it probable or possible, Carrie? Paulino is good at technology.
I have to, before I answer, I would like to say I love this. I had never thought about this probable, possible thing, but I'm really, really excited about it. Because I mean, like you said, it isn't higher order to just know that from the reading he was on Twitter and Facebook, but that's a great question. Clearly he must, I mean, it's probable that he's good at technology if he is on all of these social media things. So
yes,
I love this. But you have to really apply what you know then. I say probable.
That's right. Okay, probable.
Wait,
I'll
we know
accept
that's
that
right?
answer, but
maybe
do
he
we know
just
that's
has,
right?
maybe he's like the wizard in The Wizard of Oz, and there's some man behind the curtain that runs all the show at the EPC
all right,
show.
so
That's true. I'm just a puppet.
Number two, Carrie, Paulino has a very good tech consultant.
Now, see, that's possible, but not probable. I'm going to say possible on that one. I'm going to say he's probably the one that's... I think possible. I think he could
possible.
be...
Okay.
I think he's probably good at technology, but you never know.
Okay. You've got the idea. So I'm going to guarantee to you that I keep encouraging people who already do TPRS. You know, we're so known for, you know, circling, and I feel bad saying this. I'm not saying circling is bad if you do it minimally, but if all you do is circle, then I'm going to just say flat out, and sorry if I offend anyone, but if that's all you're doing, then yeah, I'm going to tell you it's bad. We're not inspiring any sort of higher order thinking at all. So it's really easy to sprinkle a couple of circling questions in, but I guarantee that when you really ask questions that make your students really think, they will be so much more engaged. They don't get annoyed with your questions. Really, they like it. They find it really kind of fun, like challenging. And even my low-level students, my slow cognitive processors, even my students with low literacy levels love these types of questions.
Great, and we have some of our viewers affirming all what you're saying. Sonrisa del Campo is putting a quote from Carol. It's far more important for your students to think than to be right. Exactly. And Catherine adds to the conversation, probably impossible higher learning questions for comprehension. Fantastic way to teach students knowledge without right, wrong. Thank you very much. I also want to give a quick shout out to Miriam, who's watching us today. Hola, Miriam. And obviously, you know each other. So that's great. So thank you, everyone, for their comments and questions, and keep the conversation going.
Well, we do have another session on service learning and that content-based instruction that Carol and I are going to be talking about together at the conference, that when you get a focus on content rather than a textbook theme of just what am I wearing today, when you're really looking at, you know, how can I apply these same words? We still study those words, just maybe a different context. And for me, my students in level 1 were reading a TPRS Publishing novel called Esperanza, and as part of the teacher's guide, there was a supplemental reading about some children who were living in a dump and an organization that was going into the dump to provide meals and to provide an education for those students. And in that moment, in their little limited Spanish 1 vocabulary, my kids asked, what can we do? How can we help? And I said, I hadn't really thought about it, but my friend Christy Placido had done a fundraiser to help with the organization, and so I contacted her, and we got kind of a global giving project going at school. And so one of the presentations that I'm going to be doing at Central States is this: how do you turn your class into a class that really makes a difference? Because there are so many units that we can cover that could end in some kind of a little global outreach or just even a little global awareness, because our students are going into a 21st century environment, and how can we help them be aware of how they can help or how they can share, how they can serve. And so the slide that you're going to see is some different things that my students did along with the Esperanza novel. In level 1, the students did a fundraiser, and they opened a snack shop, and I put a little picture of them. They hung it in English in the hallways so the students would all know for sure, but they also, their final project for the book study, the novel study, was to create posters that were in a Spanish that was easy for the other students to understand, so that our non-Spanish students were getting some exposure to language. And I do try and do that a lot around the school. Anytime we're studying something that has a lot of cognates, I try to have them make some kind of posters that we can hang up around school where other kids will kind of be going along and reading them and thinking, oh, hey, I speak Spanish, and then come take the class. So that marketing for your classroom. But they hung those up, and the students came and bought donuts and soda from our class, and they really quickly raised about $1,000 to send to this organization that was helping Dump the Dump, get students out of the dumps in Guatemala. The next year, the bottom picture on the slide is of my class with a speaker who actually came from Guatemala to talk to us, and we were able to support his village as they were trying to clean water that was available to the village. They said that they had a water testing company come in, and their water was 85% contaminated with feces. And so that was the water they were boiling and then having to drink. And so they needed some help trying to get the water filtered and have appropriate waste systems. And we were able to help with that. And then it caught on. These Spanish 1 kids were doing great things, and the Spanish 3 and 4 kids got a little jealous of the attention and also a little challenged to do something on their own. And so as we studied the water conditions around the world, we found a school in Africa, and they supported through an additional snack shop fundraiser. They were able to buy a water filtration system for the entire school. And so those kids are able to come in and just use cups of water rather than having to go out and boil water to use for the day. These are kind of like a Culligan water filter. The water sits in the tank, and the kids can just get fresh cups of water all the time when they need them. So it's been contagious, and it challenges me to think of ways, too, that I can connect my students with the world outside of our little sheltered environment in Carlisle. And I've found that the more that they have a reason to want to learn to speak the language, the more adamant they are that they're going to improve their fluency, the more they want to try using target language to respond back. We have a 90% rule-ish in class. Really, for all of us, we're in here to learn to speak the language, and they're engaged in these kinds of things, and so they don't hesitate to try and use language then. The last little picture over there is the Pulsera Project. If you've never heard of the Pulsera Project, they're also on Twitter. That's one of my favorite giving initiatives because you don't really have to do anything. They send you a big box of bracelets, and you sell them during a couple weeks at school. You send the money back to them to support these communities who are doing fair trade work by making the bracelets. So come to the session. We'll talk a lot about how can you get service learning on the ground in your classroom too.
That's awesome. Awesome. And, a shout out to Christy Placido at the same time, because Carrie already mentioned that Christy had done, a Dump the Dump project. And the first year that Christy did it, she contacted me and told me what she was doing, and she was so excited, and she got me all fired up, and so I was looking for different ways that we could do some things as well. And so I'll just say that my students come with a sheltered educational background, and number one, what that does is it gives you a really narrow view of the world, and so one thing that really taught me is also related to the content. When Carrie and I share our content-based instruction session, we're going to talk about a lot more than science. We just wanted to give you two, contrastive, same content areas today. But we're going to talk about content in all different ways. And so what I really took away from that whole piece was that it's my job also to open my students' eyes, to the world around them. And not just English-speaking countries or Spanish-speaking countries. And so we talk about famine in Africa, and we talk about really interesting things around the world, and my students are shocked when I show them photos. And the one thing that I really thought was neat about Carrie Toth, so it's hard for us to delineate between content and this global giving, because Carrie will share, and I'm probably giving too much, can't give them all the information, but I'll tell you that Carrie's water project, this philanthropic, project that she did with water filtration, was actually also service learning, and she actually provided water to a school in Africa, obviously not a Spanish-speaking country, but just opening our students' eyes to much more than just their town, their county, or even their country.
And it goes back to that idea that the vast majority of our kids aren't going to become language teachers, and so it lets us tap into what is it exactly that our kids might do in the future. In a water project, we can go out and test water, but we also did a lot of research on the CDC website, and they were able to see all the symptoms of waterborne illnesses, and those are cognates. But for my healthcare kids, they were like, oh, I might be better off than I thought I was, because they know nausea and vomiting and all the things that go along with their career plans, and they get into that stuff when it's something that they think they can apply to who they are. And I think there was a point in my teaching career when I was teaching just to the teachers, and so now I'm trying to broaden those roots to be teaching to everybody, whatever their area of interest is.
Right. That goes along with, and I wish everyone could just kind of think of content in terms of your passion as well, because there are so many really neat lessons that we share because we personally had interest in that area. We found something compelling, or we saw something that we just thought we wanted to learn more about, and in that we just shared our passion with our students. And so I just really encourage people to think outside the box. And I'm all for standards. I'm not for standardized education, but I'm for standards. We have to have some accountability. We want students to come out with a measurable amount of proficiency. We want them to come away with knowledge and skills that will help them in life. But if we stay so focused on this standard and this, we totally get so absorbed in that piece that we forget we're supposed to be looking at the students who are right in front of us. And
just to plug. Go ahead. You finish.
No, you.
I was just going to say a plug for our Passionate Pirate. If you have no idea where to start building on some content-based, some real passion-based teaching, Dave Burgess's book, Teach Like a Pirate, is a good eye-opener for people who think that, they don't know how yet to teach to your kids' passions, to teach to engaging your students, and it's been a lot of fun to apply some of those same ideas from the book in the classroom, and with the lessons that I'm kind of designed to lead a little bit more.
Right. And nobody credits Krashen really with, the teach like a pirate idea, and certainly Dave Burgess is not a language teacher. He didn't read Krashen, but really essentially what Stephen Krashen and what Dave Burgess are saying are identical things. Dave Burgess is saying, let's make it emotionally engaging. And Stephen Krashen says, let's make it compelling. So compelling that students forget it's in the target language. Obviously, alongside the compelling, you need the comprehensible factor, but that's why we call it compelling, contextualized, comprehensible input.
And I hope that this presentation has been compelling enough that these two ladies have shared all their passion, not only with their students, but all the teachers and educators and maybe administrators that are out there watching. And you might be compelled to come to Minneapolis for the Central States Conference, March 12 to 14, 2015, and come and see them live at their presentations.
Yes, we love to see you there.
If you can't see us in March, then maybe you'll come to the iFLT conference in July. St. Paul, Minnesota, same area.
Excellent. So Carrie and Carol, I want to thank you very much for being with me today and sharing these top tips. I know it's just the tip of the iceberg of all the content that you're going to be offering to us here in Minneapolis very soon. Thank you very much. Also to all our audience for watching. If you're watching the recording, remember you can still ask questions, and I'm sure Carrie and Carol will find a way to get back to you because they are passionate also about connecting with other language educators. So Carrie and Carol, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Paulino. It was great fun.
Certainly was. And thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.